أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس، ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا، فمن جاءه موعظة من ربه فانتهى فله ما سلف وأمره إلى الله، ومن عاد فأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. يمحق الله الربا ويربي الصدقات، والله لا يحب كل كفار أثيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة لهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين، فإن لم تفعلوا فأذنوا بحرب من الله ورسوله، وإن تبتم فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون.
Okay, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So today's topic is how to beat the 9K. I went to see Ismail once in Kiel University, and it was a very beautiful, inspiring story of how he paid £9,000 tuition fee along with his living costs without a single penny of interest. So I was it was very motivational and very inspiring, so I thought I'd invite him down. So without further ado, I present to you Ismail.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. قال الله في القرآن: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The verses that the brother recited, I think, were perfect because I kind of intended to make mention to them in this talk, inshallah. Before I get to kind of my story, what I did, what my inspiration was, I guess it's worth going through some of the context behind exactly what's happened. Those of you who are in your third year of university, I think you guys would know, because if you're in your third year, you would have been the first year to have paid £9,000. Everybody before that was okay, right? And it was this guy's fault. Because his kind of manifesto, his big selling point was scrap tuition fees, actually. Not keep them as they are, bring them down to zero. And interestingly enough, with the Lib Dems, each election campaign, they tend to have something unique about them that other parties don't have. So for example, in 2003, their big thing was to make a stand against the Iraq war. That was their unique selling point. And in the last election, it was the tuition fees, and we kind of know what happened. So I wanted to just chuck some numbers at you guys based on averages, statistics, which is most students, based on the current £9,000 system, would leave with around £45,000 in debt. Average. £9,000 tuition fees, a few thousand in maintenance loans. It's quite a lot, but it's not too bad. And most of you, again, averages, would start with something like £25,000 a year. Sounds all right? How much do you think you're going to pay by the time you finished paying off your debt? Like, chuck some numbers at me. I'm not going to ask you. Seriously, just guess. 60? Anything else? 40? Wait, 40,000? That's less than you borrowed. Interest tends to make things go up, right? It's crazy. That's like 6 digits. £100,000. It's like, whoa. Right? So it is a big deal. And so this links me to, I guess, my story and as to why I chose not to take a loan. And I guess I have two motivations. One being stronger than the other. The first one, the image on the left, is the concept of debt. And one thing I'd realized is that it's become really normal in society. Like, you're expected to graduate with debt. And a few years after you've got your first job, what are you expected to do? You buy a house. So you live a life of debt, paying back somebody else. And I don't... Personally, I think if I can go without borrowing, I'll go without borrowing. And I'd like to challenge myself to see if I can do that. Now, the second thing which I'd spend a few moments speaking about is my inspiration, which came from Quran. And I'm going to refer to this later on as well. The ayah that I recited in my kind of Arabic-y section, it began with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. So I'm going to spend a bit of time speaking about Arabic. Hopefully it will be easy enough, I guess. O you who have come to believe. So the first kind of point to highlight is amanu is a past tense verb. Just keep that in mind. Because the only thing that's certain in life, it's what? What's already happened. You can't actually guarantee the future. But the past is certain. So, O you who have come to believe. So there's an element of certainty with this belief. Ittaqullah. Be wary of God, or have consciousness of God. Which is strange because you're kind of expected to do that if you call yourself somebody who is a believer, somebody who has come to believe. So whatever is going on here, it's pretty important, and I guess it connects a lot to belief. I'm going to skip the part in the middle and go to the end. Allah is going to say, do something if kuntum, you were mu'mineen, believers. So kuntum, you were. Again, which tense are we speaking in? Past. Something to note about the Arabic language, its use of tense isn't actually the same as English. You know, in English we use tense solely to indicate time. In Arabic, at least in Quranic Arabic, traditional Arabic, you'd use tense to speak about certainty. And one of my favorite examples is shortest chapter in the Quran. Which one is it? Kawthar. It starts with Inna a'taynaka al-kawthar. Without doubt, we have already granted you. It's a past tense verb. We have already granted you Kawthar. Why? Because did the Prophet have Kawthar then? No, he was still alive. Kawthar, by the way, it's a river in paradise. God is saying to the Prophet, we have already given you Kawthar. We have already given you this river in paradise. But that can't be true because he was still alive, if you look at it literally. The reason why the past tense verb was used was to indicate certainty. Why did God want to do that? Because you look at the context. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he was going through a really hard time. Like a really difficult time. He just lost his son. And just to give you, I guess, an example of one of my students, when he passed away, I went to the mother's house as regularly as I could, had conversations with them. If you ever look at a parent who'd lost a child, it's something else. Right? So the Prophet, peace be upon him, was going through something really hard. And what made things worse was the people that were against him, instead of saying, okay, you know what, we'll calm down for a few days, give him some time to rest. No. What they did was, look, Muhammad's lineage is gone. Who's going to carry his name now, huh? That's what was happening. So psychologically, you could say this was like a stage of depression almost. It was hard. So God chose to comfort the Prophet, peace be upon him, by saying, listen, we have already given you Kawthar. It's already happened. No one's taken that away. Right? And something else on top of that, side point, but it's amazing anyway. The word choice that was used to say, we have granted you, we have given you. It's a giving that doesn't get taken away. Dua, a supplication that I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا, right? Our Lord, give us good in this life. That's a different kind of giving, because that's a giving that comes with responsibility and a giving that can be taken away. So the good in this life, God could take that. And also the giving in this life, you are responsible for. For example, your job, your career, your income, your family. God gives you that, but there's a condition. There is responsibility with it. Kawthar, the river that the Prophet, peace be upon him, got, God is saying, this is yours, it's definite, there's no strings attached. Be content, right? So going back to the ayah that I was speaking about before, past tense. Now we have some kind of context. This is like, it's certainty. Whatever is going on here, it's almost certain that it's attached to your belief. What is that? The section in the middle. وَذَرُوا مَا بَقِيَ مِنَ الرِّبَى. Leave whatever is left from usury or interest. So this is me speaking as a Muslim student, like most of you here. You know, I did hear, and I'm sure most of you have as well, you've spoken to scholars, and some say it's fine out of necessity, and that's okay. You know, I'm not here to tell you that X scholars are okay and X scholars aren't okay. That's not for me to get into. I'm not a scholar, right? I'm just about a student, you know. But this is just my own personal reflections. God has put such a big emphasis of belief, about belief on usury and interest. Why don't I just leave it? Like, I'd rather not get close to that. I'd rather not have any connection with interest in my life. So there's point one, which is just the concept of debt. And point two, it's the religious side of things. And for me, this was the big driving factor. My religion. You know, I didn't want to get near something that God put so much emphasis when it came to belief with. So then comes the question, am I actually able to do this? Because often what tends to happen, and Muslims go through this all the time, you want to make this big sacrifice for the sake of God, but then you're scared because you don't think you're Muslim enough, right? You're scared because your prayers, you know, you get distracted like within 3 seconds. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, what's the score in the match right now? You know, like it goes straight away, immediately. And so you think, like, how dare I ask God when I'm like this? You know, fair question. And God deals with that himself. An ayah that I'm hoping, a verse in the Quran that I'm hoping a lot of you know, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Which word is repeated twice? Iyaka. Why? Because Iyaka, to translate that verse, it means you alone we worship and you alone we turn to for assistance. That's the translation of the verse. You alone comes twice. And in terms of just sentence structure, one is enough. As in, if I was to say to you, you alone we worship and turn to for help, you convey the same meaning. And in Arabic, there's this thing where you keep sentences short and sweet, right? If you can do that, then excess words, it's an example of bad Arabic, actually. You want to keep things to the point. So what is the point of this second you only, this second iyaka? You know? The reason why Allah put that there is because He separated the connection of worship and turning to for help. I.e., if you're not a good worshipper, that means you can't turn to Allah for help. But by putting the second iyaka there, it means it's okay, you can still turn to God for help, even if you haven't worshipped yet. So even if you're not someone that prays regularly or prays at all even, that's fine, you can still turn to God for help. You know, it's possible. And for me that was a big deal because I didn't consider, and I still don't actually, I'm struggling and I'm striving, right? And I'd like to become a better Muslim. I would. But this for me was a big, I guess, driving force, a driving factor. The fact that God said He won't let me down. God said I can turn to Him for help. And so that's what I wanted to do. Now, there's a dua in Surah Al-Qasas, the chapter of stories. One of my favorite prophets, by the way, it's Moses, right? Amazing prophet, with some of the most amazing supplications. So I'm going to give you a quick story which is mentioned in this part of the Quran, so we can give you the context of this dua, of this supplication. Moses or Musa was going through a very difficult time. He'd been kicked out of his land. Pharaoh, Fir'aun said, if you find him, kill him. You know, he had to go, right? So he went out in the middle of nowhere. He didn't know where he was going. He was just somewhere in the middle of this far, far away land, and he was there resting by a tree. And this whole story is found in the Quran, by the way. He was there resting by a tree, and in the distance he saw that there were these two ladies it looked like they were fighting animals. He couldn't quite tell, but he noticed that they were going through some kind of difficulty. So he went up to them and said, like, yo, what's up? Why are you fighting your animals? Like, what's going on? You know? And they said that over there in the distance there's a well, you know, we tend to take our animals there to quench their thirsts. The problem is there's a bunch of rowdy men and we're not too comfortable right now to go there. So we're going to wait for them to finish and then we're going to go and quench the thirst of our animals. So what Musa did was, he said, fine, I'll sort it out for you. He took hold of the animals, took it to the well, or took them to the well, gave them water, came back, gave the animals to these two. And before they could even say anything, he walked away. He just went back to his tree. And that was the context of this dua, of this supplication. What was it? Moses said, you know, my Lord, whatever you have to give me, I am faqir. I am in like dire need of. I don't know what it is, when it's going to come, I need it. Because understand his situation. He literally had nothing. He was in the middle of nowhere. So any help that could come his way, he'd be like forever grateful. And then he went back to his tree and he sat down in the shade again. Tired man, right? These two, so switching the story again, these two ladies went home. And the dad said, why are you home early? Like, that's strange. Normally you take a lot longer than this. And they explained the story of Musa. This man, they didn't actually know his name. This man just came and did this for us, and then he went. And the father said, okay, can you make him come over here? I want to help him. I want to thank him. I want to thank him for doing, you know, what he did. And so one of them was sent back, and she told Musa that my father wants to thank you for what you've done. And this is a key point, actually, for anybody that's even considering breaking away from tuition fee loans. And it's happened before. Normally these events are actually panel events. So we get a bunch of students, each one explaining their story, and brothers and sisters, men and women, right? Because both have done it. So if you're even considering this, this is a key, I guess a key step, which is Moses or Musa at this point could very easily have said, you know, thank you very much. Like, I really appreciate what your dad has done, but I did this for the sake of God. So I'm going to wait for God to reward me. Like, this is God rewarding him. This is God giving him a means of help through somebody on earth. Does that make sense? And why this is important is because I remember speaking to a brother who was going through a similar thing, where he wanted to pay the whole £9,000, but he had no idea how. And so he started going into private tuition, and most people do, by the way, because the one thing you have as university students I hope, is some level of knowledge, right? You should be able to teach what you study, going back to A-levels or GCSEs. And so he started charging, I think, £15 an hour. But then he started saying, I feel really bad. Like, I don't think I should charge that much. And I said the same story to him. You know, this is God giving you help. Don't turn it away. Take it and make the most of it. So I had to start, and I was confused, and nothing of confusion. He comes to mind, so I've got his picture here, right? There's no other reason other than that, actually. Starting is one of the most difficult things, because you're going to jump into a territory that you had never gone near before. Like, it's really risky if you think about it, actually. You're about to enter university, and with me, for example, when I started university, I wasn't actually ready completely. I didn't have everything there. So it's a really big jump. How do you start? So this is me speaking about, I guess, myself. What did I do? The first thing I had to consider is, what were my options that were somewhat definite? So the next slide is something that a brother put together, which I'm going to show you, which is examples of different avenues of income, or bursaries, or scholarship, whatever. So I'm going to whiz through this before I come back to myself. So every university, for example, has a grant that, these are usually means tested, by the way, so it usually depends on your family income. But it's something worth keeping in mind. So maintenance grant comes through yearly. I think they divide it maybe every 3 months or something like that. The university grant is something else. Again, check your university to find out exactly how much you can get. NSP, when they decided to raise the tuition fees to £9,000, there was a pot of money, I think it was something like £150 million, that the government chose to inject back into the universities to help out those from low-income backgrounds. And I'm saying low-income backgrounds because I see brown people, I'm a brown person, we tend to be poor, right? Happens. So most are actually entitled to the National Scholarship Programme. Another example is university scholarships. These tend to be a lot more difficult to get. So there might be one where there's 3 recipients, 5, 1, whatever it is. Interestingly enough, you know that brother that I said was really struggling and he was charging £15 an hour? This was in his second year of college. And he really didn't know how he was going to do it. Guess what happened in August? He got, because he applied for scholarships too. The university sent a reply saying, congratulations, you've been selected for so-and-so scholarship. You'll be receiving £10,000 a year. It's amazing. Like, and honestly, so many people that I've spoken to, you see random examples of miracles that just work through. So he was busy worrying about £15 an hour, you know, and out comes £10,000 a year. So now university's paying him, because that's £10,000 in scholarships. He's at UCL, by the way. So it's 10,000 plus 3,000 from the government plus 3,000 from the uni. Like, he's almost got a full-time salary as a student. It's amazing. So make use of that. See what's there. External scholarships, they tend to be outside the university. For anybody that's an international student, for example, or has links with other countries or other organizations, things can happen. Zakah is an interesting one. I didn't actually know about this myself. If you're a student who hadn't taken a tuition fee loan, you're actually entitled to receive zakah. For those of you who aren't familiar with the word zakah, it's a compulsory kind of charity tax that Muslims have to pay when they reach a certain level of income. Right? It's around 2.5%. And National Zakat Foundation, have you guys heard of them before? Anybody? Take a note of them. They're really interesting, because National Zakat Foundation actually have a scholarship fund dedicated to this. Like, they've actually got a fund available for students who haven't taken a loan. And again, I'm going to try and chuck as many anecdotes, because unfortunately I don't have the panel with me, so I'm going to use their examples because it's amazing. One of the panelists, a sister actually, her name is Halima, UCL student as well. She was actually in a similar position to where you are right now. In her first year of university, she took out the loan, and she came to this event. And then she decided that, you know what, let's see how this goes. And she chose not to take the loan for the second year. And in her second year of university, she actually came to speak about her experiences. And why I'm mentioning her, National Zakat Foundation, she wanted to apply for this program, but she was actually late for the application. And she gave up. She said, there's no point now. And her mum actually said, what's wrong with you? What's the worst that could happen? Like, just send it and see what's going on. And there were issues with the online application form. Like, everything just seemed to have been going wrong. I think she sent them a Dropbox link of her application, right? Just everything was funky. And fast forward time, she had her interviews and she was given, I think, £1,500 or £1,000 in the form of a scholarship, right? When doors seem to be closed, God makes things happen. But you have to make that step. You have to make that initial step. It is so, so important. And going back to me, for example, once I decided to, I guess, make this big leap, this huge jump, for the sake of God, I was like, perfect, God, where's my money? Because I genuinely was expecting, like, wrong me, by the way, but I was genuinely expecting some random stranger from nowhere to come and be like, brother, I love you for the sake of Allah, take some money, right? I was waiting for that moment. It didn't happen. And it's a good thing that it didn't happen, because I had to make my efforts first. Like, I had to try my hardest, and then I depend on God. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of the whole, what do we do first? Do you tie your camel and then depend on God? Or do you depend on God first and then tie your camel? And what's the answer? Camel first. You have to work hard first. Like, you have to struggle. It's going to be difficult, and no one is saying it's really easy. You have to make that jump and try your best. And once you've done that, then yes, like, leave it to Allah. There's something I wanted to mention, where is it? To do with prayer, actually. It just came to me now, I thought I'd mention it. It's really cool. If you haven't guessed already, you have this thing for Quranic Arabic, right? The concept of making dua and of praying. Have you guys heard the ayah in the Quran, the verse in the Quran where God says, when my servant asks about me, say I am near? Heard of that before? Let's just, I guess, take a look at it from the perspective of Arabic. The first really interesting thing is God says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي. إِذَا being a keyword, meaning when. So just to break that down, wa and إِذَا, when. سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي, my servant asks about me. The really interesting thing about the word إِذَا, the word when, is that it's not the only way to say when in Arabic. You know, the Arabs had this thing where they measure how powerful or how amazing a language is based on how many ways you can say the same thing. Like, that's what they did. You know, so إِذَا means when, and إِذ means when, and مَتَى means when, a whole bunch of different ways. And the Quran uses a mix, right? And what's interesting about the one in this example, إِذَا, is that this is a when of something that hardly happens. For example, إِذَا وَقَعَتِ الْوَاقِعَةِ. Does anybody know what that's talking about? The day of... What time is that? When is that? Day of Judgment, Qiyamah. How many times does that happen? Once. Hardly ever happens. Right? How many times do us as believers call to God and ask God? Not enough. That's why إِذَا is used. Right? And despite that, and this is what's really amazing, despite the fact that God is basically saying, you guys don't ask enough. He's highlighting that in the word إِذَا. But even then, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Then without doubt I am close. Despite the fact that God has made it very clear, so we can see our mistakes in front of us as we read in the Quran, but God still says, I am close. And the second interesting thing about this is God is first speaking to the Prophet, and he's saying, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي. So to the Prophet, when my servant asks about me. Then the expected way to continue the sentence is, if they ask that, then Prophet, say God is close. Does that make sense? Because it began going through the Prophet, so sure, you end with the Prophet. But God actually took the lead there, and He responded Himself. So God Himself says, I am close. He doesn't say, messenger of God, tell the people that God is near you. No. God is saying, Inni qareeb. Without doubt, I am close. Like there is genuine hope. And you really need to be convinced by what's here. Like you have to be. Because otherwise you'd be scared. You'd be scared to take that leap. So the first key thing is genuinely believe that you can do it. And if you can't do that, know that God says you can, because God is there saying, call to me. Right? Have that conviction. Have that faith. It's not a problem, you know? So going back to me and what I did. Now, every single person has a skill. Like everyone. Everybody can do something. I was speaking to Marcus, actually over here, right? He's doing the video recording. His thing is photography, video, web development, right? One of the other panelists who usually comes to speak, his name is Usman. He has a thing for design. Like he really enjoys design. He'd been designing since I think year 9 or something like that, right? Different people have different skills. My thing was divided into 2. So one is I really liked economics, and I was okay at the subject too. And the second thing was, in my life I go through phases in Islamic studies. And there was a phase where I was obsessed with tajweed, like perfecting the recitation of Quran. Like I was obsessed with it. I'd spend like time at night searching for differences of opinion in tajweed. It's a very niche thing, right? It really fascinated me, right? And then that shifted to some kind of an obsession with Arabic, and in particular Quranic Arabic. And I guess on my part, one of the biggest driving forces for that was, I'm guessing you guys must have heard of him before, Nu'man al-Khan, right? Like he is, like I fell in love with the Quran through him, like genuinely. And because of that, because I began Arabic with the intention of actually speaking. I didn't say that to my teacher, but I kind of felt that, right? Because it would be really cool to speak Arabic, out on the streets, sounds quite nice. That's what I wanted. But then that slowly changed. And he was a big driving force behind that. Because now, like, you have this amazing book. And it's so full of amazing discoveries, but we just don't know. And so I started looking into that a lot. And I'd listened to him, gone through different books of tafsir, of YouTube lectures that are available, just whatever I could find. So then you could divide the things that I loved and that I was somewhat passionate about, not necessarily good at, but still the passion was there. There was economics, there was tajweed, and then there's Arabic, Quranic Arabic in particular. So these were my 3 things. I began with private tuition, and this is why I highlighted before that every one of you know, at the very least, you know something. Right? You should be able to teach your subject, whether it's chemistry or biology, physics, economics, history, English language. Big demand for it, right? It's there. So education is a really big thing. Education, as far as I'm aware, it's something that there will always be a demand for, irrespective of the economic climate, because everybody always needs to learn. So I began with private tuition. The first student that I had was in my first year of college. So my first student was for economics in my first year of college. This was before tuition fees had even risen and before anything was even confirmed. So I had no idea that this would come in handy later on, because I taught them for free. I didn't actually charge them. It was kind of somewhat of a friend, someone that needed help. So I thought, sure, why not? On a weekly basis, we'd go to the student common room in college, and we'd have like an hour and a half session. Now that student did very well. I think they ended up leaving college with an A star. And after that first year of teaching, again, I didn't expect this, but they sent students to me. So they had conversations with other people about how, economics is a bit difficult. I said, I know someone that can teach. They've been teaching me for so and so long. Oh, sure, give me their number. And so I began teaching economics. And obviously what tends to happen when it's the first time, you end up having to decide your own prices. It's really difficult and random. So I thought, £15 an hour? And they said, okay, all right, that's fine. So then it was something like £15 an hour-ish for economics tuition. And in my second year of university, I had maybe 2-3 students, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours a week. It starts to add up. And it was okay. And then also there's private tuition for tajweed, which I used to do, and I've been doing that for a while as well. And that slowly started, I guess, to add up. I've always had a thing of being anti-debt and somewhat pro-savings anyway. So I had this in me, despite the fact that I didn't know I really need this. So that grew. And then I came into my first year of university. Actually, a few quick anecdotes of my application process. I'd kind of firmed my university, and then I'd put my insurance choice there. Everything was good. And I wanted to just see what the university could do to help me out. I called up, I think it was, so I was choosing between King's and SOAS. I found this amazing. I called up SOAS and I said, okay, so here's my circumstances. I don't want to take a loan. Do you have any scholarship programs or anything that could be useful? Check this amazing answer out. They said to me, this is SOAS. You know, there's a difference of opinion about that. Like, whoa, how did you know? I was like, that's fine, but I'd still rather not take that. And they told me what was available and so on. And then I called up King's. King's were a lot more evil. Because their ending sentence was like, if you can't afford to go, I'm afraid you should probably give it a miss. So I firmed King's. Right, I thought, let's see how this goes. Again, King's, their policy was you had to pay by January the 31st. And just to make a note of that, if again you're doing this or you're thinking about doing it, check the university's policy on when you have to pay. King's, it doesn't matter what you do in September, October, November, December, so long as by January the 31st, you've paid off your 9,000. Queen Mary, for example, they allow you to stagger your tuition fees over the whole year. So you can pay something like 1,000 and something every month. UCL have this, I find this really sad. UCL, you have to pay in 2 installments of 4,500 and 4,500, which is okay, except they don't give you any grants until you paid 4,500. It's like so evil, right? But anyway, look at what your university has and work around that. So be conscious. Don't enter a decision like this ignorantly and just hope that it would work out. So I knew what I needed for King's. I think it was it's September time we're in now. I was 4 or 5 months away. I must have had, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 maybe saved up. Maybe 5, I can't remember. But I was still a while away, you know. And what was interesting is I was still a student of Arabic at the time, and I still am. Our Arabic classes shifted their time, and it shifted into the slot that I teach at. And I tried to explain to my teacher, like, I don't know if I can do this. I need to stop making some money for university. And they said, you can't do anything. So I ended up taking the Arabic and trying to rearrange the tuition, right? And I'm highlighting this as a really key thing because it's very easy to think that if you're going to go and try to beat the 9K, chances are your life is going to be overburdened with either studies or working. I was doing Arabic, I think, about 9 hours a week in my first year of university. So that's like anyone here does any social sciences by any chance? So sad. There should be more of you. But it's a Muslim thing, right? It's like medicine comes first and engineering and all that stuff. Social sciences, for those of you that do it, your contact time is actually quite low. So in your first year, you have like 10 hours a week anyway. So my contact time for Arabic was probably the equivalent to my degree. But anyway, I was trying to learn my Arabic and trying to do my private tuition. And I asked my university about their policy for the National Scholarship Program. And they said to me that it's very unlikely that you're going to get it, because we tend to prioritize partner schools. I'm not sure if it's like that here at Portsmouth, where the school has links to colleges, right? So what they said is we're going to prioritize them. So it's very unlikely you're going to get it. So I thought, okay, fine, let's just see how this goes. I kind of continued doing whatever I was doing. Then around October, November time, I got an email from the National Scholarship Programme. And they gave me £6,000, right? They said to me themselves, A, if you can't afford to come, don't come. And B, you're probably not going to get this. Plan as if it doesn't come, right? So I was busy trying to make things work without that. And all of a sudden, £6,000 from the National Scholarship Programme, plus about £1,000 from King's bursary, plus around 3.3 thousand from the government, which is what you receive if your family income is below a certain threshold. First year was done, right? And most of that money I didn't expect, which meant everything that I'd saved up so far was going where? Second year, right? So I was able to plan 1 year in advance each time, which was really cool. And one thing that I found about this whole concept of paying tuition fees by yourself, I'd learned something about me that I otherwise wouldn't have done, which is I'm okay with coming up with ideas. Like, I'm somewhat creative. I just come up with things. I just wouldn't do anything. Like, ask me for an idea, sure. How about this and this? Put these two together. When are you going to start? Inshallah, I don't know. Right, that's what I was. But this meant I had to start becoming somewhat of a doer. Like, I had to start doing things, because otherwise it wasn't going to work. So remember when I told you I was doing private tuition? I thought, you know what, let's try and push this a bit more. Instead of teaching one student, what if I get a class together? Put a bunch of kids together that want to learn economics. Because I think I can cover the syllabus quite quickly. So I think I had this thing where I was doing like the AS level, 1 year of A levels in about a week, 20 hours. And it was okay, because my first kind of mini class had about 8 students, and each student for a 10-hour program would have paid something like 50 or 60 pounds. So for them on an hour-to-hour basis, it was okay. It was a lot less than the private tuition anyway. And for me, on a 10-hour course, what I would have made then, normally I would have spent 3, 4, 5 months getting the same amount. So, okay, this is really cool. Let's do it again. Second time round, I think I might have had 13, 14, 15 students. So it almost kind of doubled. This is really cool. Third time lucky. Let's see what happens this time. And so I think the largest class that I had was something like 25 students. So I was able to kind of help plan my tuition fees in bulk. So, you know, it's not just £20 an hour and I'd wait 3, 4, 5 months for everything to add up. Within one program, I could get maybe £500 or 700 or 1,000. Right? And this is what I meant by the whole creativity side of things. You need something to push you. Like, something has to give you that push. And interestingly enough for me, the 9K was actually that thing. And so the second thing that I did, you guys, I've told you that economics was something that I was somewhat into. Something else was Quran in Arabic. What my teacher did, and I was really grateful for this, after our first year of Arabic, he made every single student teach a small class of 4 or 5 people. Every student. Because there is no better way to learn than to teach. Teaching is an amazing way to learn. Because something makes sense to you, try and explain that to an 11-year-old. This is good advice if anybody wants to go into teaching. If you can teach a kid, you're a good teacher. Go and teach him a concept from university, honestly. Because they'll be so baffed. What are you talking about? And so you explain it again. And it'll be so broken down. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I get it. If you can get that stage for an 11-year-old, take that same mechanism of explanation, give it to a 16-year-old. It becomes like, you know, literally building blocks. So easy, right? So what my teacher did, he made all of us have small classes. There's like a summer intensive course where they had 40 or 50 students. My class had about 5 students. So each student from our class was given something like 5 students from those that had come for this summer intensive. And And I had kids actually. Most of the other people had teenagers, university students. I had, when I say kids, I mean one was 8 years old, one was 11, one was 14, and the other 13. And this is interesting because it wasn't Arabic in the sense of Assalamu alaikum, peace be to you, wa alaikum salam, and to you as well. Kayfa haluk, how are you? No, it was Arabic grammar. Which is, I guess, slightly more difficult, just a bit more. So I had to really try and break it. So one thing I found about myself is I learned through songs quite a bit. So if anybody's done Arabic grammar, there's like a list of words that do things. So there's a list of words, for example, that would give kasra, which is called jar in Arabic. I'd make a song, memorize that song, and then teach them to sing after me. And it worked, because by the end of it, they knew the list of words better than like the 20-year-olds. It was really cool. So that kind of gave me some level of teacher training for Arabic grammar. And I'd also been teaching at a weekend school for a few years as well. So I thought, you know what, economics is cool, but I really, really like Arabic. Like that's it, I enjoy the language. I love Quran. So I decided to try and put together a course. And I called it, the Quran program. It was focused on Arabic grammar and going through a story from the Quran as your application. Really cool. And how I did it was not very structured or organized at all. So literally began with WhatsApp messages. Had a paragraph set up, sent it out to all of my contacts, whatever it is. And everybody saw that, okay, there's this class by this kid called Ismail, and it's Quranic Arabic. And I did it, the first class that I did was in June. Good time because it's after exams, people are somewhat stress-free. That's the time that generally Muslims like to get all Islamic, right? And also before exam because you get really religious then, right? But anyway, that tends to be Arabic time or Tajweed time. A lot of brothers, for example, would say, inshallah, in my second year of university, I'm going to go to Egypt and study Arabic, that kind of stuff, right? Happens. So I thought, okay, this is really good. Got together a bunch of people, literally word of mouth, cash in hand, that's all it was. Like, it wasn't very organized. And I think something like 22 people in the end, which was okay. And they came together, and I managed to come up with somewhat of a syllabus. And like it was there, it happened. Like I was going through elements of the Quran, and it allowed me to understand what I thought I knew so much better. Because now I had to explain it again and again and again and again, And that was really cool. And then on the back of that, like the money that came from that, I didn't actually use for tuition fees. I took that money to go to Egypt myself and to learn a bit more. Right? And I'm highlighting this again because it's important to note that paying £9,000 tuition fees doesn't mean you will not have a life. Like I went to Egypt in the summer. This was for 7 or 8 weeks or something. It was a pretty decent amount of time. Like I read the whole Quran to one teacher, gone through a couple of Arabic books with another teacher. It was cool. So now I kind of have this rough thing that exists in terms of how I'm going to raise my tuition fees. So by the end of my first year, my second year was actually ready. Everything added up. So then second year, guess what I was doing? Saving up for third year, which is good. And that happened. I continued with these classes. I did more economics classes than I'd done before. And I'd done, I think, maybe 3, 4, or 5 different Arabic sessions. So one thing I'd realized with the Arabic course that I did before, it was pretty intense, I think. It was something like 30 or 40 hours spread out through a month. And I thought that's okay for some people, but others, they need to fall in love with Quran first before you bombard them with things. So I'd started to do a few different things. So I'd done something which was going through a story from the Quran, randomly chosen. So I've done, for example, Surah Yusuf or Surah Sulaiman alayhi salam, random chapters of the Quran, random stories, and I go through that 3 or 4 hours. And my sole intention for these 3 or 4 hours was I want the people that are here with me to love the Quran like I'm trying to. That's it. And that slowly began to pick up pace. It was decent such that by the end or midway through my second year, I was actually ready for my third year, which technically meant that I was done. Like, it's okay, I'm comfortable now to know that I can finish off the rest of my degree without borrowing any money. You know, it was highlighted, I think, at the beginning by Anas that it's about avoiding interest. For me, it was avoiding interest plus avoiding debt. So I tried my best even not to borrow from family members. Again, it's not to say that you can't. If anything, if it's a choice between that and the loan from the government, I'd prefer that. Maybe that's just me, and that's okay, right? But I wanted to avoid the debts generally, in its entirety. So I was in a position where I could have stopped. Like, I was done. University was okay. Fees are finished. Maybe I should just start focusing on studies. I didn't do too bad, I guess. Like in my first 2 years, I came out with a 2-1, which is all right. So I could have stopped, but I chose not to. I chose to do, I guess, a bit more. It began with me, Ismail, teaching things. So the conversation usually was like, listen, bro, you're going to go to Ismail's Arabic thing? Or are you going to go to Ismail's economic thing? And one thing I'd realized, and if any of you ever go into any area of business, one thing I've fallen in love with over the last 6 months to a year is business, startups, entrepreneurship. I love it to bits, you know. And one thing I'd realized is very, very quickly you want to detach yourself from your organization, because Muslims have this really bad habit of, so can I get a discount because I know you? All the laughters, right? So common, so common. Or if it's your friend, listen, could you just sign me up? I'll be there inshallah. Because they know you, right? I realized that was somewhat of a problem. So I wanted to distance myself from what I do. And that's the birth of this organization, which is Satifs. Literally what happened was, one day I just got excited. I was speaking to the person who's now our designer. He started his own company called UH Designs, actually. And he started UH Design to pay his 9K, which is really cool. I was literally on, I think it was on Facebook chat. And I was like, listen, I want to register a company. Like, what? Why? I don't know. I want a company. Like, okay. So I just went to a company's house and I registered a company, like £20. For no reason other than the excitement of saying I own a company. That's it, right? And that slowly started to become something, you know. I said to you guys earlier that I could have stopped, but I chose not to. I chose not to because I realized that the position that I was in is the position that a lot of people are in today. The lessons that I'd learned, why not share them with people? And that's what this 9K event is about. You hear people from different economic backgrounds, different genders, different skill sets, all coming up with the same thing, which is how they beat the 9K. And certain things keep coming out, by the way. Certain key qualities. And one big thing is entrepreneurship and drive and ambition. Right? They become really creative. So what I started to do, the courses continued, but this time the profits from some of the courses I'd used to lend money interest-free to other students, which is cool. And when I say interest-free, as far as I'm aware, I try to keep it as transparent as is physically possible. So you borrow 1,000, you give back 1,000. That's it. Like, there's no admin fees, there's no profit rate, you know, none of that. It's literally just this much and this much. And it's okay because the organization began to get sustainability through its courses. So it's not the case that everything from the courses provided loans, but a decent amount, you know. And that began to pick up, and we ended up having like a loan pot. So it went into here, you lend it to somebody else. When they pay it back, it would go back into the pot. And it gets lent again, and again, and again. And this was amazing because, again, as a university student, it totaled, I think, something near £40,000 in loans, which isn't too bad. And this is something that I'm really hoping, I guess, to grow. and to make this something a lot more. Two things have come out as my life lesson, and I guess as my vision for this organization. It's using education to drive change. Because whatever I've done, education was at the heart of it. And the second big thing for me is to encourage entrepreneurship from or with young people, like yourselves. It's an amazing thing to start a business. If you have a skill with calligraphy, or you know a brother who says atar, I don't know, perfume, right? There's a really nice thrill. You know, you come up with your own designs, you build your own website, you do your own thing, and the skills you get, by the way, are amazingly transferable. Like you put that on your CV that you've got your own business. It's like, wow. So it's more than just the religious side of things. You know, وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنًا. That's fine. In the next life you get good. The concept of business actually gives you فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا. Like it gives you goodness in this life. So jazakumullah khair. Is it okay if I take questions? If anybody has any questions, which I'm happy to try my best to answer, I guess. Does anybody have any questions?
Where do you get your figures for the initial thing where you said about the interest?
Yeah. If you literally just Google student finance debt repayment calculator, you can enter how much you've borrowed, how much you're expected to earn, and it calculates it. And you actually get a year-to-year plan as well. So you can get that online.
Obviously, one of the things of organisation is having an organised plan or diary. Do you ever have one of those?
Diary.
Your own personal year plan?
At the beginning, no. At the beginning, I just wanted to pay for my university. Like I had no intention for any of this. Now it's something different. So we've actually got a board of directors at the moment. One really cool guy who's with us. Like he's worked with Google and Shell, so he's dealing with strategy. I have a dedicated web developer who's building a new website. Dedicated designer, UH Designs, right? The guy who started that company. He's helping us out with the design element. Like I really like the poster for this event. That was his magic work. You know, so the structure is coming into place.
Do you have a personal organisation thing from juggling all your work and all your tuition, all these things?
One thing I've noticed is that everybody has got time, and when you busy yourself with loads of different projects, that same amount of time you end up using it a lot more productively, almost always. So despite the fact that I've kind of listed a bunch of things where teaching, having a company, and obviously there's the degree too, you know, I still like find times to sit down for like 2-3 hours to play FIFA. Yeah, it happens. Like that's my Friday night sometimes.
Do a lot of product in your time?
I hope so. It's open to everybody. The back?
The name is Satifs.
Yeah. Interesting question. It's two things. One was it's kind of Arabic links. This was the minor reason. Like Satafa means to kind of stack or to store or to organize, right? And this event, this organization, it has this vision of organizing people and helping develop loads of leaders. But the main reason is that it was an inspiration behind one of my students. And it's after her name that the organization came about. Any other questions at all?
Can you just talk a little bit more about the organisation? About obviously there's a pot. What else is included? What else do you do?
Okay. So I divided the organization into two. There's the institute, and then there's business. Initially, I was going to call it business finance, but finance comes with loads of negative connotations, so you scrap that and call it business. The institute, a big thing is the Arabic segment. So there's the stories through the Quran that I do regularly now. There's a Quran program that exists, a 1-week intensive. There's one thing, inshallah, I'm hoping to do this summer is a 1-month intensive, which I'm quite excited about. Venue is still to be confirmed, so we'll see how that works out. And then the other side of the institute is, you know, the A-level intensive that I was doing? I found it a pretty cool concept because I haven't seen that before, where people were teaching A-levels intensively in short spaces of time. So at the moment it's economics, but I'm planning, inshallah, to expand that to other subjects. So if somebody's really good at history, sure, teach an intensive in history. You're good at, I don't know, maths. Maths is like, everyone loves maths, everyone needs maths. Teach an intensive in maths. And ideally, I'd like to develop a teacher training program to help people teach, teaching people how to teach. And then the business segment, there's the loans, which I've spoken about. There's the How I series, so How I Beat the 9K is part of that. Another one that we held in UCO, I think back in October, How I Got an Internship. Panel of students from ethnic minorities explaining their story. Guys from Google, from Shell, BP, really big companies, banking as well. I think Morgan Stanley or something. And the one that we held, I think, last week was How I Succeeded After University, a Muslim woman's perspective, which I think was really exciting. Because Sheikh Akram Nadwi came to speak there to talk about what women have done in Islam in history. And then we had a panel of 4 sisters speaking about what they've done. One was a journalist at The Guardian, one was a barrister, one is currently pursuing a PhD, I think, I can't remember what it was in. And the 4th sister is involved with loads of different charity projects, masters in physics, so like really amazing people today. And the final segment of business, it's to do with this stuff, startups. So helping other people start things up. So one thing, inshallah, we're hoping to do is come up with a competition, hopefully in July. So a lot of stuff is happening. Yep.
So how do you choose who's on the board of directors?
The person that that I had, there were 2 initially, and one is, well, there's 2 executive directors and 2 non-executive directors. All of them I've known for a few years, and I've seen their CVs, and I know the caliber of the work that they do. So one of the non-executive directors, for example, he's pursuing his 2nd degree in law. He's got a degree from one of the best universities in Canada. He'd done studies in Islamic finance in Singapore. He actually won a startup competition that was judged by McKinsey over in Singapore. So the skill sets are there. The other person who's on the board of directors dealing with strategy, I saw Google and CV, wow. That was one of many things. He'd been involved with 3 or 4 different companies. He started companies himself, so the experience was there. So it's essentially utilizing what I see from them to bring them forward. And even within the organization, actually, inshallah, once the new website is up, we're going to be opening up positions for people to get involved. Because so many people have come to me saying, like, I'd love to volunteer, I'd love to get involved, and like, I'd love to have you there too. It's just, I want to have a really professional platform to build that. Because one thing I've noticed as Muslims, you know the whole thing about ihsan, excellence. We tend to speak about excellence when it comes to worship, prayer, which is completely true. We need that. But we forget the concept of excellence in day-to-day life. Like, as far as I'm aware, if you're a Muslim, you need to have excellence in design. You have to have it. That's what it means to be a Muslim, excellence in all aspects of life. If you're a Muslim, you aim for a first at university because you're a Muslim. Like, that's what it means, you know? So I want to build a platform for people to apply easily in a way that's clean, and then the process, it's CV and interview. And then from then on, inshallah, they can join. So, is there a question at the back?
I was going to ask, without that 6K that you got from that organisation, do you think you would have been able to?
Yes. Because I'd reached the stage where I was coping on a year-to-year basis. All that 6K did was it allowed me to prepare a year in advance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I was in a position where I was okay anyway. That just made life really easy. So yeah. Any other questions? I'll be around, inshallah, after this is finished anyway. So if you'd like to have a conversation or a chat, I'm here. Assalamu alaikum.
I would just like to thank Ismail again. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions, he'll be around. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.